an original story narrated exclusively for love written in silence. Lady Emmeline, Blackwood's crimson dress, sliced through the wedding guests like a wound. As she strode confidently down the garden path, her smile sharp with anticipation. Clara Winthrop's hands trembled around her modest bouquet, the weight of her borrowed veil suddenly suffocating as whispers rippled through the crowd. The Duke of Ainsley, tall and imposing in his formal attire, continued his measured steps forward, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. As his mistress positioned herself prominently at the aisle's edge, society held its collective breath, waiting for the inevitable humiliation of the invisible bride, until Sebastian Larkhaven did the unthinkable. He walked past Lady Emmeline without a glance, and knelt before Clara with quiet, deliberate purpose. Clara Winthrop had long ago accepted her place in society, or rather, her lack of one, the third daughter of a respectable but unremarkable family. She had mastered the art of existing without being noticed. At 26, she moved through ballrooms and drawing rooms with practiced efficiency, arranging flowers, turning pages of music for her more accomplished sisters, and making polite conversation that left no impression. "Miss Winthrop, might I have a moment of your time?" The deep voice had startled her as she organized tea trays at Lady Harrington's spring garden party. Clara looked up to find Sebastian Larkhaven, the Duke of Ainsley, standing before her, tall and imposing, with dark hair and eyes that missed nothing. He was the most powerful man in the county, and the last person she expected to seek her out. "Your Grace," she curtsied, wondering what service he required. Perhaps direction to the card room, or the whereabouts of a more interesting guest. "I have a proposition of a somewhat unusual nature," he said, his voice low and controlled. "Would you walk with me?" They strolled to a secluded corner of the garden, where Clara waited patiently for whatever request he might make. What came instead was entirely unexpected. "I find myself in need of a wife, Miss Winthrop, a particular kind of wife." Clara's expression remained composed, though her pulse quickened. "I'm afraid I don't understand, Your Grace." "I believe you do. You are observant, discreet, and possessed of impeccable manners. You manage difficult social situations with remarkable grace." His gaze was direct, assessing. "I require a duchess who will perform her duties without drama or excessive demands on my personal life." Clara understood perfectly. The Duke's long-standing relationship with Lady Emmeline Blackwood was common knowledge, as was the fact that his uncle, the Lord Chancellor, had recently demanded he marry to secure the succession. "You wish for a convenient arrangement," she said, her voice steady. "I offer security, position, and respect," he replied. "I will be faithful once married. I am not asking you to accept humiliation. Lady Emmeline understands that our association must end." Clara doubted that very much. She had seen the possessive way Lady Emmeline looked at the Duke, how she spoke of him as if he were already her husband. "Why me?" Clara asked, the only question that mattered. "Because you see everything and say nothing. Because you understand discretion and duty." His expression softened slightly. "And because you deserve better than to spend your life arranging other people's happiness while neglecting your own." It was the closest thing to kindness she had received in years. Not passion, not devotion, but recognition. Someone had finally seen her. A week later, Clara sat in her father's study as he reviewed the marriage settlement with barely concealed astonishment. "This is extraordinarily generous," Mr. Winthrop said, adjusting his spectacles. "The Duke has provided for you most handsomely, regardless of whether there are children." Clara nodded. "He is a fair man." Her father hesitated. "Clara, my dear, you understand the nature of this match. The Duke is known to have attachments. He has promised fidelity in marriage," she replied simply. "Yes, but—" Her father seemed uncomfortable. "His affections may remain elsewhere." "Are you prepared for a marriage without love?" Clara looked at the document before them. "I am prepared for a life with purpose, father. The Duke needs a duchess who will manage his households and social obligations with dignity. I can provide that." What she didn't say was that a marriage without love seemed far less painful than continuing to hope for something that would never arrive. At 26, with no beauty or fortune to recommend her, Clara had long since reconciled herself to spinsterhood. The Duke's proposal offered something unexpected: visibility. The weeks that followed passed in a blur of fittings, meetings with household staff, and lessons on the extensive Ainsley properties. Clara met with the Duke only 3 times before their wedding day, each meeting brief and businesslike. He approved her selections for redecorating the ducal apartments, provided a generous allowance for her wardrobe, and introduced her to his steward and secretary. Of Lady Emmeline, there was no sign, though rumors circulated that she had retreated to her country estate in a fury. Clara chose to believe the Duke's promise that the relationship was over, while privately preparing herself for disappointment. The night before her wedding, Clara's mother came to her room, concern etched on her face. "Are you certain about this, my dear? There is still time to reconsider." Clara was arranging her wedding clothes for the morning, her movements precise and methodical. "I am quite certain, mother. The Duke is a powerful man with a complicated past. They say he—" "I know what they say," Clara interrupted gently. "And I know that gossip is rarely accurate." Her mother sighed. "I only want your happiness." Clara turned to face her. "This is not a love match, but it is a choice I am making with open eyes. The Duke has been honest about his expectations, and I about mine." What she didn't add was that she had begun to see something in Sebastian Larkhaven that others missed. Beneath his controlled exterior was a man burdened by responsibility and perhaps regret. During their brief meetings, she had caught glimpses of weariness in his eyes, moments when the weight he carried seemed almost too heavy to bear. Clara had no romantic illusions about transforming the Duke or winning his heart, but she did believe she could provide something he needed: a partner who would stand beside him without demanding what he could not give. As dawn broke on her wedding day, Clara dressed with calm determination. The ivory gown was more elaborate than anything she had worn before, the Ainsley diamonds heavy around her throat. Looking in the mirror, she hardly recognized herself. Today she would become a duchess, not for love but for purpose. It would be enough. The wedding ceremony was to take place in the formal gardens of Ainsley Park, a tradition for ducal marriages dating back centuries. Clara stood at the entrance to the garden path, her father beside her, watching as guests arranged themselves in neat rows on either side of the white gravel walkway. At the far end stood the Duke, his tall figure unmistakable even at a distance. He looked every inch the aristocrat in his formal attire, his expression composed as he waited for his bride. The string quartet began to play, signaling Clara's entrance. She took a deep breath, steadying herself for the walk that would change her life forever. Her father patted her hand reassuringly as they began their slow procession. They had covered perhaps half the distance when a disturbance rippled through the assembled guests. Heads turned, whispers erupted, and a path cleared as someone moved purposefully through the crowd. Lady Emmeline Blackwood emerged at the edge of the aisle, resplendent in a gown of deep crimson that stood out like a drop of blood against the pastel attire of the other guests. Her beauty was undeniable, golden hair arranged in elaborate curls. Her figure shone to advantage in a gown that pushed the boundaries of propriety. Clara's step faltered momentarily. She had prepared herself for many things, but not this. Not a direct confrontation on her wedding day. Lady Emmeline's presence was a calculated insult, a public challenge. The whispers grew louder. Clara forced herself to continue walking, though her heart hammered painfully in her chest. She kept her gaze fixed on the Duke, waiting for his reaction. Would he acknowledge his mistress? Would he halt the ceremony? Sebastian Larkhaven's face revealed nothing as his gaze moved from his approaching bride to the woman standing boldly at the edge of the aisle. For one terrible moment, Clara thought he might turn toward Lady Emmeline. Instead, the Duke did something no one expected. He walked forward, his steps measured and deliberate, as he drew level with Lady Emmeline, whose smile had turned triumphant in anticipation. He passed her by without a glance. The collective intake of breath from the assembled guests was audible in the sudden silence. Sebastian continued until he reached Clara. Then, to the astonishment of everyone present, he knelt before her on the gravel path. It was not part of the ceremony. It was not required by protocol or tradition. It was a choice. A public declaration more powerful than any words could have been. "Miss Winthrop," he said, his voice carrying clearly in the hushed garden. "I come to you as I am, offering what I can. Will you accept me as your husband?" Clara looked down at the Duke, at Sebastian, kneeling before her. Behind him, she could see Lady Emmeline's face transform from triumph to disbelief to fury. But it was the expression in Sebastian's eyes that held her attention. A quiet intensity, a plea for understanding. "I will," Clara answered simply. He rose then, offering his arm to escort her the rest of the way. As they walked together, Clara was acutely aware of Lady Emmeline's abrupt departure. The rustle of her crimson skirts as she pushed past startled guests. The ceremony proceeded without further incident, the traditional vows exchanged with calm dignity. If the Duke's hand trembled slightly as he placed the ring on her finger, Clara pretended not to notice. It was done. She was now Clara Larkhaven, Duchess of Ainsley. The wedding breakfast that followed was a subdued affair, the earlier drama casting a long shadow over the festivities. Clara performed her duties as the new Duchess with composure, accepting congratulations and making appropriate conversation. The Duke remained at her side, his manner courteous but reserved. It was late evening by the time they retired to the ducal apartments. Clara had been shown her rooms earlier, a beautiful suite connected to the Duke's chambers by a discreet door, as her new lady's maid helped her change into a nightgown of fine silk. She wondered what her husband expected of their first night together. A soft knock came at the connecting door, just as the maid departed. Clara wrapped a robe around herself before calling. "Enter." Sebastian stepped into the room. Changed from his formal attire into a dressing gown, his expression was guarded. "I hope you find your accommodations satisfactory," he said. "They are lovely, thank you." An awkward silence fell between them. Finally, Sebastian spoke again. "I must apologize for Lady Emmeline's behavior today. It was unforgivable." Clara met his gaze steadily. "Yet you made your choice clear to everyone." "I did." He hesitated. "I want you to know that I meant what I said before. Our marriage will be based on mutual respect. I will not dishonor you. May I ask why you knelt?" The question had been on her mind all day. "It wasn't necessary." Sebastian's expression softened slightly. "Because you deserved a choice, even if it was only symbolic, and because I wanted everyone to understand that this marriage is not a mere convenience to me, but a commitment I take seriously." Clara nodded, unexpectedly touched by his answer. "Thank you for that. I will not intrude upon you tonight," he added quietly. "There is no need to rush matters between us." As he turned to leave, Clara called after him, "Sebastian." It was the first time she had used his given name. "Whatever comes, we will face it with dignity. That I can promise you." He paused, something like gratitude in his eyes. "Good night, Clara." "Good night, Your Grace." 3 weeks into their marriage, Clara had established a comfortable routine. She rose early, reviewed household matters with the housekeeper, corresponded with charitable organizations under her patronage, and gradually made herself familiar with the extensive Ainsley properties and tenants. Sebastian proved to be a considerate, if distant, husband. They dined together most evenings, their conversation gradually easing from awkward politeness to genuine exchanges of ideas. He seemed surprised, and then pleased to discover her interest in estate management and agricultural improvements. Physical intimacy remained unconsummated, though Clara sometimes caught Sebastian watching her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. Not desire, precisely, but something close to wonder, as if he were seeing her anew each time. The relative peace of their arrangement shattered one morning when Sebastian entered the breakfast room, his face grave. He held a newspaper in one hand. "There's something you should know," he said without preamble. "An old accusation has resurfaced." Clara set down her teacup. "What accusation?" 5 years ago, I was accused of causing the death of Thomas Mercer, the son of the Marquess of Halford." His voice was controlled, but Clara detected the tension beneath. "The young man drowned after a dispute at my hunting lodge. It was ruled an accident, but there were those who believed otherwise. And now the Marquess claims to have new evidence, a deathbed confession from one of the servants present that night." suggesting I pursued Mercer in anger and drove him into the river. Sebastian placed the newspaper before her, opened to a small article that hinted at the scandal without directly naming him. Clara read it carefully. This is deliberately vague, designed to provoke speculation rather than inform. Yes, the Marquess is too clever for outright libel. He prefers to let rumor do his work. Sebastian's expression darkened. I did argue with Mercer that night. He was drunk, belligerent, but I did not pursue him when he stormed out. He took a horse and rode off in a rage. The animal returned alone hours later, and we found Mercer's body downstream the next morning. Clara studied her husband's face. I believe you, she said simply. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, perhaps relief. You may be the only one. The timing of this is no coincidence, Clara. It comes just after our marriage, when I've finally secured the succession that Halford's family has coveted for years. And Lady Emmeline, could she be involved? Her family has close ties to the Halfords. Sebastian ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of agitation. I should have anticipated this. I've put you in an impossible position. Hardly impossible, Clara replied calmly. I am your wife. We will address this together. Later that day, while Sebastian met with his solicitors, Clara made her way to the estate office, a room she had not yet had reason to visit. The steward, Mr. Phillips, seemed surprised by her appearance, but quickly recovered his composure. Your Grace, how may I assist you? I need to review all correspondence and documents related to the Mercer incident, she said directly. Phillips hesitated. His Grace has not authorized. I am the Duchess of Ainsley, Clara interrupted, her voice gentle but firm. And I am acting with my husband's interests at heart. The documents, please. Something in her steady gaze convinced him. With a slight bow, Phillips unlocked a cabinet and withdrew a leather portfolio. Everything is here, Your Grace. His Grace instructed me to keep it secure after the initial inquiry. Clara spent hours reviewing the materials. Statements from guests and servants, the coroner's report, letters from the Marquess's solicitors. One document in particular caught her attention. A transcript of the servant's statement, taken immediately after the incident. It contradicted entirely the supposed deathbed confession, now being circulated. When Sebastian returned that evening, she was waiting in the library. You've been investigating, he observed, noting the documents spread across the desk. Yes, and I've found inconsistencies in this new accusation. She indicated the papers before her. The servant who supposedly confessed, William Dawkins, gave a clear statement after the incident that matches your account. For him to contradict that years later, on his deathbed no less, seems suspicious. Sebastian moved to stand beside her, scanning the documents. Dawkins died 3 months ago. I sent condolences to his family. Then how did this confession only emerge now? Clara asked. And why wasn't it brought directly to the magistrate? A shadow crossed Sebastian's face. Because it's not about justice. It's about destroying me. He looked at her with sudden intensity. Clara, I want you to consider returning to your family until this is resolved. Your reputation is tied to yours, she finished firmly. I will not abandon you to face this alone. You don't understand what they're capable of, Sebastian insisted. The Halfords have influence throughout society. They can make your life unbearable. Clara rose from her seat, meeting his gaze directly. Do you know what I find most troubling about this situation? Not the accusation itself, but your assumption that I would flee at the first sign of difficulty. I'm trying to protect you, he said, frustration evident in his voice, by making decisions for me. By deciding what I can endure? Her voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath it. That is not protection, Sebastian. That is control. He stared at her, clearly taken aback. In their brief marriage, she had never challenged him so directly. You married me because you believed I understood discretion and duty, Clara continued. Trust that I also understand loyalty and truth. If you are innocent, and I believe you are, then we will prove it, together. For a long moment, Sebastian was silent. Then something shifted in his expression, a softening, a recognition. Together, he agreed quietly. Though I fear you may regret that choice. Clara's smile was small but determined. I make very few choices I regret, Your Grace. Clara's investigation began methodically. With Sebastian's reluctant permission, she interviewed staff who had been present at Ainsley Park 5 years ago. Most remembered the incident vaguely. A tragic accident following a hunting party. The young Mr. Mercer found drowned after riding out in a storm. His lordship and Mr. Mercer were arguing earlier, recalled Mrs. Winters, the housekeeper. About politics, I believe. But that wasn't unusual. Mr. Mercer was known for his provocative opinions. And afterward, when Mr. Mercer left, Clara prompted. His Grace remained in the billiard room with the other gentlemen. I brought in fresh decanters myself. Mrs. Winters hesitated. If I may speak freely, Your Grace, please do. There was talk among the staff that Mr. Mercer had been inappropriate with one of the maids earlier that day. His Grace had spoken sharply to him about it. Some thought that might have been the real cause of their disagreement. This was new information. When Clara mentioned it to Sebastian that evening, he looked uncomfortable. It's true. Mercer had cornered a young maid in the corridor. I intervened and told him such behavior wouldn't be tolerated in my home. His jaw tightened. Our political argument later was merely the culmination of tensions that had been building all day. Why didn't you mention this before? Sebastian sighed. Because it provides me with a stronger motive. If the Halfords learn that Mercer and I quarreled over his treatment of a servant girl, they'll twist it to suggest I was enraged enough to pursue him when he left. Or, Clara countered, it demonstrates your character, that you would defend someone vulnerable, regardless of their station. Sebastian gave her a look of surprised appreciation. You have a generous view of my character. I observe what's before me, she replied simply. The following week, Clara attended a musical afternoon at Lady Harrington's. Her first social engagement since the rumors began circulating. She felt the stares as she entered, noted the whispers behind fans, and the subtle shifting as people moved away from her. Only Lady Harrington greeted her warmly. My dear Duchess, how lovely to see you. Pay no attention to these vultures. They'll find new carrion to pick at soon enough. Clara smiled gratefully. Thank you for your kindness, Lady Harrington. Nonsense. I've known Sebastian since he was in short pants. The idea that he would harm anyone is absurd. She lowered her voice. Though I should warn you, Lady Emmeline is here today. Clara had expected as much. Then I shall be sure to compliment her gown. The crimson she wore to my wedding was quite striking. Lady Harrington's eyes widened before she burst into delighted laughter. Oh, my dear, you are perfect for him. The encounter with Lady Emmeline came sooner than expected. As Clara accepted a cup of tea, a familiar voice spoke from behind her. Duchess, how brave of you to show your face in society. Clara turned calmly. Lady Emmeline, I'm pleased to see you recovered from your indisposition at my wedding. You left rather abruptly. Lady Emmeline's perfect features hardened slightly. I left when I realized what a farce it was. Tell me, how does it feel to be married to a man who may soon face murder charges? Slander is such an unattractive quality, Clara replied evenly, especially when based on hearsay. Hearsay? Lady Emmeline's laugh was brittle. William Dawkins was quite specific in his confession. I saw His Grace follow Mr. Mercer from the house, shouting that he would teach him respect if it was the last thing he did. Those were his exact words. Clara maintained her composure, though her mind was racing. How interesting that you know the precise wording of a private deathbed confession. Were you present when Mr. Dawkins made this statement? A flicker of uncertainty crossed Lady Emmeline's face. Of course not, but the details have been discussed. Have they? By whom? The confession hasn't been formally submitted to the magistrate yet. Clara sipped her tea. Curious that you would know its contents before the proper authorities. Lady Emmeline's cheeks flushed. You're naive if you think your husband is innocent. Sebastian has always had a temper. I should know. Yes, Clara agreed pleasantly. Which makes your involvement in this matter all the more interesting. Before Lady Emmeline could respond, Clara excused herself to speak with their hostess, leaving the other woman staring after her in barely concealed fury. That evening, Clara recounted the exchange to Sebastian in his study. She quoted the supposed confession, Clara explained, word for word, according to her. Yet how could she know the exact phrasing unless she'd seen it before it was officially recorded. Sebastian looked up sharply from the papers he'd been reviewing. That's impossible unless she or someone connected to her was involved in creating it, Clara finished. The timing is wrong, Sebastian. William Dawkins died 3 months ago. Yet this confession only emerged after our wedding, after you publicly rejected Lady Emmeline. Sebastian rose from his desk, pacing the room. Emmeline's cousin is married to Halford's youngest son. She could have been the connection between them. He turned to Clara, his expression intense. You noticed what everyone else missed. I noticed things, Clara said simply. It's what happens when you spend your life being overlooked. You see what others don't. Sebastian crossed to where she sat, kneeling beside her chair in an echo of their wedding day. You are remarkable, Clara Larkhaven. It was the first time he had used her married name with such warmth. Clara felt a flush of pleasure at the admiration in his eyes. We still need proof, she reminded him gently. Yes. He rose, his expression resolute. And I believe I know where to start. Dawkins had a daughter. She works as a seamstress in the village. If anyone knows whether her father actually made such a confession, it would be her. The next morning, they rode together to the village. The seamstress's shop was small but neat, with finished garments displayed in the window. Mary Dawkins proved to be a serious young woman with her father's straightforward manner. My father never made any confession, she stated firmly after they explained their visit. He stood by his original statement until the day he died. The Duke was in the billiard room when Mr. Mercer left. Father served drinks there himself. Did anyone approach you after your father's death? Sebastian asked. Anyone asking about the Mercer incident? Mary hesitated. A gentleman came about 2 months ago. Said he represented the Mercer family, wanting to provide compensation if my father had ever spoken about that night. Her expression hardened. I told him father never changed his account. He seemed disappointed. Can you describe this man? Clara asked. Tall, well-dressed, had a scar along his jaw. Mary frowned in concentration. He gave his name as Mr. Reynolds. Sebastian and Clara exchanged glances. Reynolds was known to be the Halfords' estate manager, and a man willing to perform less savory tasks when required. Thank you, Miss Dawkins, Sebastian said. You've been most helpful. As they rode back to Ainsley Park, Clara could see the tension easing from Sebastian's shoulders. We have a starting point now, she said, and a witness who can testify that attempts were made to fabricate evidence. Sebastian looked at her with newfound respect. I've spent 5 years defending myself against whispers, never thinking to question the source. His voice softened. Thank you, Clara, for believing in me when you had every reason to doubt. I believe in evidence, she replied, and in looking beyond what people want me to see. After a moment's hesitation, she added, and I believe in you, Sebastian. The smile he gave her then was unlike any she had seen before, open, genuine, touched with something that might, in time, become affection. The county assizes were held in the imposing stone courthouse at the center of town. Clara sat straight-backed on the hard wooden bench, conscious of the stares directed her way. As the Duchess of Ainsley, protocol would have allowed her to remain at home, spared the public spectacle. She had refused that protection. Your presence is not required, Sebastian had told her that morning as they prepared to leave. Indeed, many would consider it improper. Many would also consider it proper for a wife to abandon her husband at the first scandal, she had replied, pinning her hat with determined precision. I am not concerned with their opinion. Now, as the magistrate entered and the court rose, Clara caught a glimpse of Lady Emmeline, seated with the Halford family across the room. Their eyes met briefly, Lady Emmeline's narrowing in hostility before she looked away. The proceedings began with the Marquess of Halford's solicitor presenting their case. The alleged deathbed confession of William Dawkins, claiming he had witnessed the Duke pursue Thomas Mercer from the house in a rage on the night of his death. We submit that this new evidence warrants reopening the investigation into Mr. Mercer's tragic demise, the solicitor concluded, and that the Duke of Ainsley should answer for his actions that night. The magistrate, Sir James Thornton, was a thin, precise man known for his fairness. "This is a serious accusation against a peer of the realm," he observed. "Before proceeding further, I must be satisfied as to the provenance of this new evidence. Who recorded this alleged confession?" The solicitor hesitated. "The statement was provided to the Mercer family by a trusted intermediary who visited Dawkins before his death. And this intermediary is prepared to testify under oath?" Another hesitation. "Unfortunately, he is currently abroad and unavailable." Sir James's expression hardened. "I see. So we have a written statement, with no witness to its taking, no signature from the deceased, and no one willing to swear to its authenticity." "The document speaks for itself, Your Honor," the solicitor insisted. "Documents rarely do, Mr. Hargrove." Sir James turned to Sebastian's solicitor. "Mr. Bennet, your response." Mr. Bennet rose, his manner calm and methodical. "We categorically deny these allegations and question both the timing and authenticity of this supposed confession. Furthermore, we have witnesses present today who can testify that William Dawkins maintained his original statement until his death. Mary Dawkins was called first. Dressed in her Sunday best, she spoke clearly and without embellishment about her father's consistent account of that night and the visit from Mr. Reynolds to compensate her if she would confirm a different version of events. Next came Mrs. Winters, the housekeeper, who confirmed that Sebastian had remained in the billiard room after Thomas Mercer stormed out of the house. Throughout the testimonies, Clara watched the magistrate's face, noting his careful attention to each detail. She also observed the Halford family, the Marquess growing increasingly rigid, his wife whispering urgently to Lady Emmeline, whose composure was visibly slipping. Finally, it was Sebastian's turn to speak. He rose with quiet dignity, his voice steady as he recounted the events of that night. "Thomas Mercer and I disagreed on several matters that day," he acknowledged. "Political differences, certainly, but also his treatment of a young maid in my household. Our final argument in the billiard room was heated, but brief. He left of his own accord, taking a horse from the stables, despite the approaching storm. I remained with my other guests, as multiple witnesses have confirmed." Sir James studied him thoughtfully. "And you have no knowledge of how Mr. Mercer came to be in the river?" "Only what the subsequent investigation determined, that his horse likely lost footing on the slippery riverbank in the darkness and storm. It was a tragic accident that I have regretted for 5 years. But it was not of my doing." The magistrate nodded, then turned to the final witness, Mr. Reynolds himself, who had been located and compelled to appear by court order. Under Sir James's precise questioning, Reynolds's carefully constructed story began to unravel. He admitted to visiting Mary Dawkins, but denied offering compensation when presented with a letter found among his possessions, a letter from Lady Emmeline, suggesting a solution to the Sebastian problem. His composure cracked entirely. "It wasn't supposed to go this far," he blurted out. "Just enough doubt to damage his reputation, that's all." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Lady Emmeline rose abruptly as if to leave, but the magistrate's voice cut through the noise. "Lady Emmeline Blackwood, you will remain seated. It appears your involvement in this matter requires examination." The proceedings continued for another hour, each revelation more damning than the last. The fabricated confession, the conspiracy between Lady Emmeline and the Halfords, the timing deliberately chosen to coincide with Sebastian's marriage, all exposed in methodical detail. When Sir James finally delivered his ruling, his voice was cold with controlled anger. "This court finds no cause whatsoever to reopen the investigation into Thomas Mercer's death. The Duke of Ainsley is and remains completely exonerated of any wrongdoing in that tragic incident." He fixed the Halford family with a stern gaze. "Furthermore, I am referring this matter to the Crown Prosecutor to investigate potential charges of perjury and obstruction of justice against all parties involved in fabricating evidence." As the court adjourned, Clara felt Sebastian's hand close gently over hers. She looked up to find him watching her with an expression of profound gratitude. "It's over," he said quietly. "Yes," she agreed, though she knew the whispers would not disappear overnight. Reputation, once questioned, was never fully restored, but the truth had prevailed. And that was what mattered. As they left the courthouse together, Clara held her head high, ignoring the curious stares and whispers. Sebastian's hand remained at the small of her back, a steady, protective presence. For the first time since their wedding, they walked not as Duke and Duchess fulfilling a contract, but as husband and wife, united against those who would harm them. Spring arrived at Ainsley Park, bringing with it a gentle transformation of the gardens and grounds. Pale green buds unfurled on ancient oaks, and daffodils created rivers of gold across the lawns. Clara found herself spending more time outdoors, supervising the planting of new flower beds near the East Terrace. The weeks following the court hearing had brought other changes as well. Lady Emmeline had departed for the continent, her reputation severely damaged by the revelations of her involvement in the false accusations. The Halfords had retreated to their country estate, facing potential legal consequences for their actions. And within the walls of Ainsley Park, something subtle but significant had shifted between its master and mistress. Sebastian sought Clara's company more frequently now, not merely for practical matters of estate management, but for conversation, for walks through the gardens, for quiet evenings in the library. They had developed a comfortable rhythm, a partnership based on mutual respect that was gradually deepening into something more. One evening, as they sat before the library fire, Sebastian closed the book he had been reading aloud and studied Clara's profile in the flickering light. "You never asked me why the Halfords hate me so much," he observed. Beyond the obvious matter of the entailment they believed should have come to them, Clara set aside her embroidery. "I assumed you would tell me if you wished me to know." Sebastian's smile was wry. "Always so careful of boundaries, even now." "Especially now," she replied quietly. He rose, moving to the window that overlooked the darkened gardens. Thomas Mercer was more than just the Marquess's son. He was engaged to be married to my cousin Catherine, the last of the direct Ainsley line before me. When she died of fever the month before their wedding, the Halfords lost their chance at joining our estates through marriage. And they blamed you for their disappointment, Clara surmised. They blamed me for everything, for inheriting what they coveted, for surviving when Catherine did not. Sebastian turned back to face her. Thomas was bitter, resentful. The night he died, he accused me of orchestrating Catherine's illness to prevent the marriage. "That's absurd," Clara said, indignant on his behalf. "Of course it was. I loved my cousin dearly. But grief makes people irrational, and the Halfords have nursed their grievances for years." He returned to his seat opposite her. "I should have told you all this before our marriage. You deserve to know what you were walking into." "Would it have changed anything?" Clara asked. "Would you have chosen differently?" Sebastian considered her question seriously. "No," he finally answered. "But I might have better understood the gift I was being given." The quiet intensity in his voice made Clara's heart beat faster. She looked down at her hands, suddenly uncertain. "I've been thinking about our arrangement," Sebastian continued when she remained silent. "The terms we agreed upon before our marriage." "Oh." Clara kept her tone neutral, though apprehension fluttered in her chest. Was he regretting their union now that the crisis had passed? "I wonder if you would consider renegotiating certain aspects." Clara raised her eyes to meet his. "What aspects did you have in mind, Your Grace?" "Sebastian," he corrected gently. "After all we've faced together, surely we can dispense with formality in private." "Sebastian," she amended. "What changes do you propose?" He leaned forward, his expression earnest. "When I asked you to marry me, I offered security, position, and respect. I said nothing of companionship or affection." His voice softened. "I find now that I wish to offer those as well, if you would accept them." Clara felt warmth spreading through her chest, but caution made her hesitate. "Because I helped clear your name." "No." Sebastian moved to kneel beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "Because you saw me, truly saw me, when no one else did. Not the Duke, not the power or the position, but the man beneath it all. I merely observed what was before me," Clara said, echoing her words from weeks earlier. "You did more than observe. You believed." His thumbs traced gentle circles on her palms. "No one has ever looked at me the way you do, Clara, as if I am worthy of trust, not just deference." Clara's breath caught at the tenderness in his voice. What exactly are you saying, Sebastian? That our marriage need not remain one of convenience. That I have come to care for you deeply. That I would like us to be true partners, in every sense. His eyes held hers, vulnerable in a way she had never seen before. I am not offering grand passion or romantic declarations. I don't know if those are in my nature, but I am offering my heart, imperfect as it may be. Clara looked at him kneeling before her, an echo of their wedding day, yet utterly different. Then it had been a public statement. Now it was a private truth. I have never wanted grand gestures, she said softly. Only honesty, and the chance to be seen. You are seen, Clara. Sebastian raised one hand to gently touch her cheek. You are the most remarkable woman I have ever known. The kiss that followed was gentle, tentative, a question rather than a demand. Clara answered by leaning into him, her hands rising to rest against his chest when they parted. Sebastian's smile held a wonder that made him look younger, unburdened. Does this mean you accept the new terms? He asked, a hint of playfulness in his tone. I believe further negotiation may be required, Clara replied with matching lightness. But the preliminary terms seemed promising. 2 weeks later, Clara stood before her mirror, adjusting the pearl combs in her hair. Tonight would be their first formal dinner party as host and hostess. A small gathering of neighbors and allies who had stood by them during the scandal. Sebastian entered her dressing room without knocking, a habit he had recently adopted that Clara found she didn't mind at all. He watched her preparations with appreciative eyes. You look beautiful, he said simply. Thank you. She turned to face him. Is everything prepared downstairs? Perfectly. Thanks to your excellent planning. He crossed to stand behind her, his hands coming to rest lightly on her shoulders. But we have a few minutes before our guests arrive, and there's something I wanted to give you. From his pocket, he withdrew a small velvet box. Inside lay a ring, not ostentatious like the Ainsley diamonds she had worn at their wedding, but a simple band of gold set with a single perfect pearl, surrounded by tiny sapphires. It was my mother's, Sebastian explained as he slipped it onto her right hand, given to her not for status or obligation, but for love. I thought it fitting for us now. Clara looked up at him, her eyes bright with emotion. It's perfect. As they prepared to descend to greet their guests, Sebastian paused in the corridor, kneeling suddenly before her. Clara's confusion turned to amusement as he carefully adjusted the hem of her gown where it had caught on her slipper. There, he said, rising. Now you're perfect. The gesture, so domestic, so thoughtful, touched Clara more deeply than any grand declaration could have. This wasn't the Duke kneeling before his bride for show, but Sebastian caring for Clara because he wished to. What are you thinking? He asked, noting her expression. That sometimes the quietest choices are the most meaningful, she replied, taking his offered arm. And that I'm very glad to be your wife, Sebastian Larkhaven. His smile as they descended the stairs together was all the answer she needed. Their marriage, begun as a practical arrangement between strangers, had transformed into something neither had anticipated. A true partnership, founded on respect, strengthened by adversity, and now, most unexpected of all, flourishing into love. Not the passionate, tumultuous love of poetry and novels, but something equally powerful in its quiet certainty. A love built on seeing and being seen, on choosing each other day after day, on the profound understanding that came from facing the world side by side. It was, Clara thought as Sebastian's hand covered hers on his arm, exactly the love she had never dared to hope for, and all the more precious for being so unexpectedly found.